This is Fergus Hodgson with the Impunity Observer podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And I am honored today to be speaking with Simon Hankinson of the Heritage Foundation. His official title is Senior Research Fellow in the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation. Now, at the Impunity Observer, we examine the nexus of the Americas, or we say geopolitical intel at the nexus of the Americas. So this is the man for the job. And he has a new report out, which I think he's been working on for a year or two. And it is titled, The U.S. or the United States Must Redesign Asylum Law for 21st Century Reality and Put America First. Now, obviously, that's a broad headline, so there's a lot going on here. Simon, thank you for giving me your time. And do you want to just give us a little bit of your background as to why you're the man for the job to assess this topic?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Fergus. I've had many jobs, but the ones that matter, I guess, I was a lawyer, I was a teacher. I joined the State Department as a Foreign Service officer and American diplomat in 1999 and retired in 2022. And since then, I've been a senior research fellow here at Heritage, writing on border security, immigration. I've been to the border 5 times. And the topic of asylum and refugee law and policy obviously is front and center when you're talking about the Biden policies over the last 4 years. And so I just started researching more into how other countries were coping with mass migration, legal and illegal. And as you say, over a couple of years, really, I've been putting together this paper to compare and contrast and figure out what lessons we could take out of it.
Right. And do you want to clarify, when you retired, was that just because you had had enough, or was it a natural occurrence in that you were scheduled to be retiring?
That's a complicated one because the Foreign Service actually allows you to retire fairly early compared to some professions. If you do 20 years and you hit the age of 50, you can retire with a pension. Um, but I might have stuck around longer. I also write quite a bit about the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, racial preferences, and the mess that has become our federal government and many of our institutions with sort of woke ideology in the past few years. And I would say that that impacted a lot of people, that affected the careers of a lot of people of about my generation, and certainly the ones coming up. And so when I had the opportunity to come somewhere where I could write and think and appear on TV and podcasts and such freely, I definitely jumped at it. I really love the job. I love working for the Foreign Service, for the government, but I do think it needs some help, some restructuring, and some sort of placing back on the rails with American values and basic principles like equal opportunity and fair treatment at the heart of it, as opposed to the siding that it's on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who are not so familiar with the Heritage Foundation, it is the largest self-described conservative think tank in the United States. It is based in Washington, D.C., so it's a federal think tank, but it covers all sorts of issues, and I've been to many events with them over the years. Now, this particular center, so this topic of asylum, do you want to clarify for people what is the current status? Because my understanding is that it is a mess. There are, let's say maybe even millions of outstanding asylum claims. No one really knows who is eligible or not, or how to verify these cases. What is the current situation?
Yeah, a mess is a good way to describe it. And it's actually very similar to what you see across Western Europe, frankly, where you've had an influx of people who are, by and large, economic refugees. They're people fleeing countries with bad governments and weak economies where there aren't opportunities to try to find work. And the easiest way to do that, because there aren't unlimited visas for people from developing countries into developed countries, is to claim asylum. And the system was set up after World War II essentially to protect Jews fleeing Nazis, so religious persecution, political persecution, and Soviet dissidents fleeing communism. And it's now being used as a filter for economic migrants. There are a small percentage of people coming who actually have genuine refugee cases as they would have been defined, years ago under the Geneva Convention. But really, we have a backlog in the millions now of cases clogging up the system that are not approvable. That doesn't mean that they don't get approved. I've seen refugee cases approved from countries that I've lived in, like Ghana and India and Fiji, where I don't think you can make a credible case. You can say it's poor, there's not a lot of economic opportunity, but I don't think you can make a credible case that these people are being persecuted by their government. So we have already had a backlog back in 2021 when President Biden took over, but then he essentially opened the borders and let in somewhere around 11, 12 million people who were completely inadmissible, meaning they would never have qualified for a visa. He paroled a couple million in, but the majority they just released at the border. They caught them entering illegally, took their fingerprints, whatever name they would give, whatever information that they had on them, and then released them into theoretical deportation proceedings. With the assumption, this is on the part of the Biden administration, that they were going to claim asylum, and many of them have not done that and probably never will. They just disappeared. Some of them claimed asylum, and as I say, most of them are unlikely to be approved. So we've got really millions of people in this kind of limbo now that President Trump is trying to undo.
Just clarify there, mate, because there's just so much, there's such a big issue. You said 11 to 12 million. How clear are we on those numbers of people who have been let in without any lawful case?
We're not really clear on the numbers. The estimates of illegal immigrants in the U.S. are somewhere around 22 to 25 million. The estimates that came in under Biden are about 2.5 million, what they call gotaways, people who entered without inspection. So there was a footprint, or they're on a camera somewhere. There's some evidence that they came in, but they never encountered an officer. They just disappeared. And then you had, as I say, about 1.5 million people who were paroled in, people who were completely inadmissible, but who the Biden administration decided to allow in under this quasi, don't want to get too much into the weeds, but it's not a visa, it's not a permanent status, and they're not even technically admitted. They're just paroled for a temporary period, supposedly on a case-by-case basis. And then the majority were about 12 million people were encountered at the border, meaning technically arrested, administratively arrested. They were trying to enter the U.S. illegally. And of those, a proportion were simply released. The Secretary of Homeland Security in December of 2023 said that they were releasing more than 85% of those that they caught. I don't know if that was a consistent number throughout the administration. It was a little lower in the beginning because we still had Title 42, which allowed us to expel people under COVID regulations without giving them the opportunity to claim asylum. But let's say 85% of 10 million people. So yeah, that's why the estimate is somewhere north of 10 million, but it is not a precise estimate by any means.
I would like to announce my latest book, The Latin America Red Pill, My Search for Freedom South of the Border, available in Spanish as La Píldora Roja de América Latina. This book distills 15 years of exploration and analysis and is part autobiography. If you want to get past political correctness to understand the reality on the ground, read The Latin America Red Pill. You will learn how to survive the law of the jungle, when a move to Latin America makes sense, the key to entrepreneurial success in the region, what Latin America needs to achieve development, and a whole lot more. Go to Amazon.com or click the link below to get your copy. Thank you. Yeah, it just is a tremendous number of people. We're talking almost 10% of the US population is now without lawful status. It is huge. And I've seen numbers, even students who come here with legal status, something like 40% will overstay or violate their visa requirements. It is huge. And I am more familiar with this because I'm an immigrant from New Zealand and I'm familiar with the various ways of coming here. And I have permanent residence, but it was a long process. Now, this also, the way you describe asylum is important because, as you say, it's quite a high burden of proof to say my government is targeting me personally such that my livelihood is in danger. The problem, it seems to be, is that the people are already here before they make this, place this proof. So how can we flip that and make them somehow apply before they get here? Is that even possible?
Well, that's really what I'm arguing in the paper is we have to just start all over again. Instead of our Refugee Act of 1980, which codifies the UN Convention, we need to have a new refugee program. So refugees and asylees are essentially the same thing. They qualify in the same way. They have to prove persecution on 5 specific grounds, but you identify refugees overseas before they come in, and asylees claim asylum, like you said, these students after they come. So that's a much harder thing to do. And if they are refused, then you have to actually get rid of them and send them back home. So what Australia did, I think, is really model in this regard. Is they said, well, you know this, I'm sure, better than I do, but they had a policy of not letting anyone arrive illegally by boat. Ever become an Australian or have the right to remain. And it had an incredibly effective result. And within a fairly short number of months, there were almost no arrivals by sea in Australia. And they would put them in Nauru and Papua New Guinea in camps. And the problem was essentially solved. You didn't have people drowning at sea, and you didn't have people gaming the asylum system. Now, you still have people arriving by plane and claiming asylum, which is a whole different problem. But I think what the U.S. needs to do is something similar, where we had a Remain in Mexico program, which was extremely effective, and I believe it's coming back if it's not back already, where if you attempt to come into the U.S. and claim asylum by land, you're told to remain in Mexico while your claim is heard. But I actually think we need to go beyond that and actually cap the number of asylees that we can accept altogether. I just think the demand exceeds the supply. We cannot ever, yeah, I don't think we can ever process and accept all of the people in the world who are going to make a case for asylum.
The case for asylum getting mixed up with economic refugee or just economic migrant status does seem clear when people are not moving to, let's say, Costa Rica, which would be, let's say, politically stable, but wouldn't offer as many economic benefits, right? Why are they all arriving in the United States? Because the economic benefits, not necessarily the political stability. So this is weird. So do you want to put a number on that cap? Did you give a ballpark figure?
I know the number of people in the U.S. refugee admissions program was 125,000, I think, was the cap. Um, and I don't really know what an appropriate cap is, but I think unlimited is not an appropriate cap. We've seen what's happened in Western Europe, where they've been deluged, and some of these countries are facing population change, cultural change at a speed that I think is politically destructive. If you look at the elections in Germany and France and Italy and Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden over the past decade, you see that right-wing parties, right-of-center parties, conservative parties that want to shut this down are winning bigger and bigger numbers, and sooner or later are going to be able to take power in places like France and Germany. And then the solutions are going to have to be much more radical. So I think maybe we can get on top of this early on and establish some control over our refugee and asylum policy in the U.S. by using offshoring and also insisting that people claim asylum in the first safe country they get to, as opposed to traveling half the world to get to the place that they ultimately want to go.
That's right. So just to give people a little bit of a sense, now these numbers fluctuate each year, but I remember about a decade ago or more when I looked into this, the US population was growing by about 4 million per year. And about a quarter of that was coming from immigration, so about a million per year. So 100,000 is still a lot versus the natural population growth of the country. Let's say the US is growing at about 1% per year. That's still a lot. Now, so you touched upon this next question, which is always a challenge. And I find this tough because we live in an era where seemingly both in the United States and Canada, so much is happening out of executive order rather than through legislative initiative. Is there actually the will in Congress? And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. Maybe it's beyond your, I don't know, scope of work, but to pass this kind of substantive reform, like a kind of like a unplug and plug in something new rather than just add more on top?
There's the will among certain members of Congress who get it, but we haven't had a bipartisan consensus since 1996, really, on immigration. That was the last time we passed any kind of meaningful reform. And I think we've become much more divided since then. If you look at the Jordan Commission, was chaired by a Texas Democrat named Barbara Jordan. The recommendations that they made are all things that I completely agree with. They wanted to get a control of illegal immigration so that they could improve the quality of legal immigration and make it suitable for our economic and social and national needs. But Democrats today, most of them are radically further to the left than they were in 1996. And I think Republicans, after 4 years of watching Biden open the doors, have moved, have really hardened our position too, because we're tired of being run over. So, the will for compromise on things like allowing people who've been living here illegally for a long time but paid taxes and yada yada, no criminal record, to stay. That will is in very short supply. And on the left, you've just got people who just they don't believe in borders and walls and nations. They believe everybody in the world has a right to migrate. They're globalists, and that struggle between the globalists and the nationalists. It does not seem to be, in Congress anyway, coming to any kind of compromise in the next few years.
That's right. There really is a fundamental tension almost between people who believe in US or American exceptionalism and those who just don't, or almost have a hostility towards the idea that we should preserve distinctive US character. Now, do you want to touch upon that? Because it is a tough question, putting America first. Do you want to clarify what you mean by that? Is that fiscal status or linguistic, uh, or cultural fit? I mean, what characteristics are we looking for here, and can we even apply those to people seeking asylum?
I think every country, just like every family, has a right to determine who comes into their house and eats their food, and every organization, business, church, restaurant even has a right to say who gets to come in and who doesn't on their terms. Countries have a right to determine who comes in. And if you look at the success of America, the reason why we're so successful is because we allow individuals to make their own lives, to start businesses, to seek their happiness and their prosperity. But we have certain agreed values: freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, democracy, and so on. And people have to ascribe to those values. And we call that assimilation. We have a national language, whether or not it's in our Constitution or our laws. English is the language that our founding settlers spoke, most of them. And that's the language of our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution and our laws. And learning those documents and learning that language is an important part of becoming an American. We can be diverse in our religions and in the books we read and the music we listen to, but we've got to share those basic democratic values. So when you have someone like Mahmoud Khalil, this student from Syria, I think he was, that's now a bit of a cause célèbre on the left. He belongs to an organization that literally says they want to rip down Western capitalism. They want to destroy Western civilization. I don't see how that's compatible with this country's survival. If you allow people in who literally want to destroy the very thing that they say that they're coming, that they're seeking, I don't think it works. So when I say, America first immigration, it means a policy that it is generous, as we always have been, to people seeking to come here, but that also demands of them an allegiance to what makes America strong. I mean, immigrants come to Great Britain and Australia and the United States for a reason, right? They're coming because there's economic prosperity, there's healthcare, there's roads that are maintained. The corruption is much lower than it is in a lot of the world. And we want to make sure we don't kill that golden goose by lowering our standards to the developing world as opposed to raising theirs up to our levels.
Yeah, it's a very tricky issue, Simon, and because with that particular individual, I think, how did this guy get into the country to begin with? What is the actual selection process? Because going around and chasing people because of their activism or social media posts, obviously, it really, it's unsettling, right? In terms of people thinking what they can and cannot say. And I know because I've been outspoken, and I'm on a green card, for example, and I wonder if a less friendly government would find things to call out of what I've said and what I've said. So it is a tough issue, but is now, I know, like I said, the Heritage Foundation, whatever you want to say about them, they do have influence in Washington, D.C. Is there actually legislation in the pipeline to overhaul or reform the asylum process? Because it seems like, how bad does it have to get before it will be addressed? I mean, here in Colorado, there have been illegals, accumulating in Denver for the last few years. It's totally out of control, and we even had the big standoff with the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua in Aurora. So, ironically, the state I'm living in is one of the hotbeds for this. And I just think, at what point will the impetus be great enough to actually bring some kind of legislative change?
That's a good question. Things seem to have to get worse before they get better. I would hope that states like Colorado are going to eventually, sober up and realize that having a sanctuary policy where everybody gets housing and education and health care for free on the taxpayer dime, it's just not a workable solution if you're talking about the entire world. They're going to have to get a handle on it. They're going to have to hold criminals accountable and not protect them just because they happen to be illegal immigrants. On a national level, I've not seen any. I just wrote the report a week ago. I'm not expecting all of a sudden people are going to jump and read it. These things take a while to percolate through. You have some members of Congress, Chip Roy is one, and there are others who have always been kind of on the forefront of this. I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene just put up a bill that we're going to have to record special interest aliens and publish that information. I've seen other bills about.
So then, what is special interest aliens? What is that?
So we had the worst cases. If you're on the terrorism watch list, there's a list of people who have some known association with terrorism, known or suspected terrorists, they're called. And then you've got what we call special countries of special interest. Places where there are active terrorist groups. The North Koreas,
That there really is a strong case. Yeah.
Well, it's just a place where if you get a tourist coming in from Cornwall or from New South Wales to go to Disneyland, just statistically that person is less likely to be a member of a terrorist group than if they come from a country where there's a bunch of active terrorist groups, in the field. So the special interest aliens are people who are flagged. There were like 70,000, I think, came in the last 4 years. It doesn't mean that they're all necessarily terrorists, but when we're bringing in millions of people without any vetting whatsoever, we're discovering that some of them, a significant percentage. I mean, out of every 100,000 people in America, there's at least 5 murderers. That's our national average. We're bringing them in, and we don't know who they are. So this bill, I think, is just to shed light on that particular population. So we've got bills here and there that advance the cause, I would say, of controlled immigration, but we don't have an omnibus bill. And right now, the fight is all about the budget, and that seems to be the priority. So I hope immigration and reform, including asylum reform, is going to be on the calendar before the midterms. But I have not myself heard of any specific legislation that's out there.
Okay. Yeah, because this is something that's personal to me, and because the big challenge I face, and like I said, because I've experienced directly, is that the whole immigration system in the United States seems absolutely upside down, where you have millions of people who are unvetted, and yet my good friend from Australia, who's been living here in Colorado, is stuck in Australia, even though he has a job here waiting for him. He's been working here. He went back to renew his visa in Australia, and somehow the bureaucracy is impeding him. So there's this very laborious and almost treacherous path to try to achieve it legally, and then even trying to call up the U.S. Federal agencies to address this. No one will answer the phone. It's very disorganized, and you might have to wait weeks for them to get back to you. So it's ideally, of course, we want the right people to find a welcoming and streamlined process, and the wrong people to be identified. And so I don't know how this will change, but of course, you've contributed to this discussion. Are there any particular elements of this report that you would like to bring to the attention of our listeners, particularly the international audience?
Well, whenever you read a heritage report, if you read the first half of the page and then the last half of the page, you're kind of going to get the nutshell. It's really the recommendations. We have to start again, and we have to come up with a system that has limits on it. Get rid of the fraudulent asylum claims and set a limit that we can live with. Because you're right. I mean, we benefit from legal immigration, but it also has to have a cap, and we should make that easy We're never going to be able to satisfy everybody who wants to come. That's impossible. But whatever number we pick, if it's 1 million a year, as it is now, or 500,000 or 2 million, we need to make that process streamlined and quick and responsive. And then we need to have zero of the illegal kind. And right in the last 4 years, we've diverted all the resources to the illegal kind. And now we're in the middle of, doging the government and trying to cut fraud and waste and abuse, and that's going to disrupt things for a while. But hopefully, once that settles down, we'll be able to concentrate the resources from consular affairs at the State Department and USCIS and DHS on the cases that need to be moved through, that are the no-brainers, and not waste all of our time on bogus asylum cases.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So the particular theme that stands out for me is this, let's say, putting America first, national interest versus globalism. The United States just cannot be all things to all people. And that seems to be a problem of people who don't have loyalty to the United States. And that is manifest, unfortunately, in the immigration system and what we might call holdovers within the federal government. Now, we've run short of time, and maybe this is a topic for another day, Simon, because I'm concerned that, and I have friends and working in the federal government, that many of them just do not relate to regular Americans. It's almost like a different clique of people. And I'm not sure whether you want to give a comment on whether that can be addressed long term. I think there's an organization you're affiliated with that is trying to support more classical, liberal, constitutionally minded people to enter the federal government.
Yeah, actually, that would make a great conversation for another day. I just testified before the House Foreign Affairs Committee a couple days ago on DEI at the State Department, and how the pipeline in has gotten even worse. So that the leftist bias has gone from 60-40 to like 90-10. That's just not healthy. We are not a 90-10 country. We're more of a 50-50 country when it comes to politics. And it's not good to have the federal government seen by people on the conservative side as resistant and almost the enemy, because they are not doing their job of enforcing and carrying out the policies of the duly elected president of the United States. I think this is a balance that needs to be put back in order, and it's going to take an awful lot of work.
And I do get lots of emails. You're a very productive man from you. Is that a public email list that people can request to be added to?
No, not that particular one where you and I send out articles and things from time to time. But I mean, if you follow my Twitter account, which is Watchful Waiter One, I tweet out most of the articles that I write from there, and it's all pretty easy to find with Google these days. Fortunately, I have a pretty rare name.
So yeah, it is Watchful Waiter One on X. And Simon, like I said, you've been incredibly productive. I mean, you don't necessarily have a super high profile, but your productivity is incredible. You're getting a lot of content out there, and I read not all your articles, but many of them. So, folks, yeah, the report is the United States must redesign asylum law for 21st century reality and put America first. And you'll find the links on the show notes, or if you're on YouTube, just click below in the description. Otherwise, Simon, thanks for your time. It's a privilege to meet you.
It's always great to talk to you, and look forward to the next time.